Hello and welcome to a new episode of A Case for Black Metal's Greatest Album. Joining me today is Malus from Apocatastasis, frequent collaborator here.
Hello.
And and today we're going to be doing a fairly, well-respected yet at times often forgotten classic, the legendary Vlad Tepes and Belkètre split, March to the Black Holocaust. So thanks for joining me, Malus, on this one. This is a fantastic split, and it really does showcase the best of both bands.
I'd say so, yeah.
So, for a little bit of context, everyone by now should know, what the Les Légions Noires are, right? The French Black Legions, right? So, Vlad Tepes, founded in '93 by Vlad and Vorlok Dragsteam. You get multiple demos between '93 and '95. A lot of these demos throughout the years would kind of end up being recycled. Some of them even lost and would only, appear here as reworked tracks, those being Brouillon 1 and 2, which were, I don't think they were ever made public, which is one of the issues with the LLN, right? A lot of bootleg stuff, a lot of fake recordings, and a lot of times the band does not want to release them. But what's quite funny about the French Black Legion is that while many people do believe that they kind of kept to their vow of secrecy, that was never really the case. After Vlad Tepes started with the rehearsal Winter '93, and then immediately after, their following demo, War Funeral March, was released on Full Moon Productions. Who are known for bringing Burzum to the States, right? So, very rapid movement that came in a blink of an eye and disappeared between kind of like, we could say the earliest would be 91, and by 95, 96, depending on who you ask, the whole thing was completely dead. So it comes up to about like, yeah, 85 demos by about 15 individuals, if not less. All right.
Hmm.
Especially, and then on the other hand, we have Belkètre, formed by, I'm not going to bother pronouncing their full names because, as everyone should know, they made up their own language, which I believe they called Gloâtre. These guys are still making demos to this day. Vord has a Bandcamp. He's got a label, Calais Darkness, which is still posting free Patreon, everything. Mainly more ambient stuff and amongst other things, right? But Belkètre is a bit of an the kind of no compromise black metal is a bit of an outlier within the kind of discography of Vord and Akon Ketre. Oh, you still here?
Hi. Yeah, I just don't know that much of the background. I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll be editing this part out. So let's start with this. Malice, what are your initial impressions on this split?
On the split, well, we have, to put it quite obviously, we have Vlad Tepes and Belkètre. And I guess that means nothing by itself, but to me, I see it as black metal's two, I guess, most common sounds. We have Vlad Tepes, which is this very folky, triumphalist, and sort of, I guess, nostalgic sound where it has these very dun 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 sort of chords, and the progressions just remind you of like when Johnny comes marching home, if you guys know that song.
Mm,
And for Belketra, it is the other side, which is the more agonized, despairing, violent sort of part of the sound that you'd see on something like, I'm not sure, I guess like some Burzum songs, like the start of Feeble Screams from Forest Unknown and Key to the Gate. That's like the main comparison I'd make with the abundance of tritones and the very chromatic, but like intentionally chromatic riffing with just these dyads that aren't in themselves uh inherently dissonant, but how they're moved around creates this uneasy feeling. And I feel like that's Belketra's main. that's their sort of hinge point is how they use these dyads, like these raised fifths or diminished fifths. They just move them around. They don't really use power chords like that.
Yeah, in many ways, this is kind of like a reaction to black metal, to Norwegian black metal, in the same way that Norwegian black metal was a reaction to death metal, right? I went through quite a few interviews. A lot of these bands do deny it, but the Norwegian influence is still very present. I think Vlad Tepes did admit to being influenced by early Mayhem, but I think a lot of these guys were really trying to follow on the kind of path set by Burzum, right?
Hmm.
Considering from my knowledge, I think the only one that ever played live was, Mutilation, right? And that's despite being part of the LLN, they were on in a completely different universe compared to the other guys. Manak is a very public individual, for example, and it reflects
Yeah.
in the kind of in the music here. This is really, I think on both sides, it's it's their interpretation of what black metal must be, what it should be.
Yeah, mutilation was just, I guess, the one that made it big out of all of LLN. I guess Vlad Tepes is closely behind, but that's because Vlad Tepes, I think, is quite inaccessible, not like accessible, because like the production's still ass,
Mm,
but it's more in line with your, I guess, typical sort of music theory. Because like I said, it's just mostly folk sort of folk sort of melodies and harmonies but with this black metal aesthetic exterior and these sometimes long-winded song structures.
yeah. And now, you can obviously tell that the kind of only common thing that kind of, mainly brings this style is the Bathory influence, right? Because, both sides of the split show a considerable Bathory influence. And I think in many ways they wanted to bring black metal closer to what Bathory was doing, right? But obviously with their own twist.
Hmm. Um, I'd say what is interesting, what sets them apart from, I guess, the other folky black metal is that it seems to be much larger in scope. Like I said, a lot of the long, some would say meandering song structures. Even though people would find or be turned off by that, I feel like it gives it a greater mystical quality that I guess other folk black doesn't have, where it's more obvious and in your face. And I also find that through like the chord progressions and production, because these chords are sort of ugly because of the tone of them,
Mm.
but in reality, they actually can make pretty decent uh and like consonant and just ethereal type chord progressions that I guess a lot of other black metal like can't really replicate.
Yeah, there's almost a kind of psychedelic vibe to them, to Vlad Tepes, and unlike pretty much anyone else, maybe except for Mutilation once again, they're the only band that one had songs longer than like 5 minutes, and two were capable of playing very consonant melodies, and probably had probably were more musicians than the other guys around them.
Mm, I'd say so. I mean, I'd say musician more in the traditional conventional sense because from what I'm gathering based off of my limited knowledge, I know you did more of the background. It seems Vord has like the biggest artistic impulse out of any. And you can say whether that happens to be a good thing or a bad thing based off of what he's created. Um, I haven't listened to that much. I listened to some of his ambient stuff. It's hit or miss. Some of it's pretty good, some of it's kind of funny. I'd say overall that I enjoy his art though. But in terms of, I guess, conventional sort of musicianship, yeah, Vlad Tepes and Mutilation are probably the two uh best acts in LLN.
Yeah, I think you said something that was really interesting to me in that one of the issues with the whole of the LLN in many ways, and Vordb is kind of the best exponent of what that style was, is that sometimes it does tend to come across as being fairly goofy, misplaced, a bit, confused, like you're not sure what it's trying to do. But when it hits really hard, I feel.
I mean, yeah, I feel like they just wanted to experiment very, very hard with some of these.
Mm,
Like outside of the mutilation, even some mutilation can be quite weird and experimental because some of the drumming on those mutilation albums is so bad, but then it kind of wraps around and becomes good because it's like, oh, I understand the vibe they're going for. Because it's supposed to be like very weak, and I guess like I don't know, it's like you're a dying, dehydrated old man crawling through a desert. It's supposed to like
Exactly.
just replicate that like sort of delirious sadness or just despair and
Mm.
neediness.
I mean, what's always impressed me with Vord, right, is that despite his very limited tools in the conventional musicianship sense, he has a lot of range, right? Like he is still making music to this day. He posted an upload this morning, right, on his Patreon. His Bandcamp's already active, and it's crazy how much he's capable of doing with so little. And this split is literally, the Belkètre side at least, is only a fraction of what he's capable of doing with pretty much the same tools.
Yeah. But what's interesting, I try to listen to his other music, and I don't think out of what I've listened to, there was ever a real drummer. Like there was like a metronome, or it sounded like he was like banging sticks on a table, and the guitar was a lot less distorted. It kind of sounded like a DI tone,
Mm.
and then he was just like shrieking very ugly over it. And it was strange. I I think I could only listen to that in like a very, very specific context. Like I couldn't just be, you know, on the drive home from work and just put on what's that one band called that he's in?
Well, yeah,
Brennorit Vre
Verkosk.
Zork.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, the noise black. With some of the songs supposedly inspired by the works of Dario Argento and Goblin.
Mm. Dario Argento and Gal isn't that like Suspiria?
Yeah, exactly. Suspicious soundtrack, which I
Hmm.
can kind of see it does make sense in its own way, but this guy's aesthetic sensibilities are so far from removed from anything else.
I feel like he takes a bit from I feel like the French have this weird primordial sense to kill within them because just how many, I guess, violent pieces of art that they produce. We have like dissect, and you have like the new French extreme movement in movies, and that one philosopher I forgot the name of.
Um, was it
They're talking
the
about like pleasure and pain.
Bataille?
He was
Yeah,
like, yeah,
Georges
yeah.
Bataille. Yeah,
It's just like I feel like he is sort of along that evolutionary line of just like French being like really fucked up and violent, and that's sort of where he gets a lot of his ideas for, hey, I'm gonna just make the most screwed up piece of music ever.
yeah. I mean, what's funny is that going through these guys, a lot of their influences, right, outside of just like kind of the usual suspects, right, Venom, Bathory, Early Mayhem, whatever, is that these guys were actually really into like a lot of artsy French stuff. A lot of really artsy literature, a lot of like kind of, you know, like you said, like decadent, French art from the kind of early 20th century, late 19th century. A lot of poets like Baudelaire, I think even to some parts Edgar Allan Poe, because they keep, a lot of these demos keep repeating the word raven and such. And that really gives them this kind of like very unique, sophisticated yet incredibly violent, depraved, and self-destructive vision, right? And they really managed to bring it to make it come to life musically.
Yeah, I'd say more so with I guess the more dark ambient and Belkètre stuff.
Mm,
Uh, Vlad Tepes seems to be more along the lines of traditional black metal, like folky longing a la Burzum.
mm.
And that's why I remember we were going to discuss why I prefer the Belkètre side and you prefer the Vlad Tepes side. Can I make my case first?
Yeah, go for it, go for it.
I think I like Vlad Tepes a lot. I think in terms of the black metal that takes inspiration from like Bathory and Burzum, it's some of the best. But I always am going to be a tiny bit tired of that sound because it feels way too nostalgic and romanticized.
Mm.
It's just like, oh, drink the Celtic poetry because we used to be Celts and shit or whatever.
Yeah,
And it's
I
like, it's
mean they are
cool.
from Brittany, right? So they have that.
It's cool. And I understand the sound, but I feel like it's a bit too caught in time. Not to seem like an edgelord, but I don't really care that much about, I guess, the historical longing. I feel like Belkètre tries to make something that's a lot more, I guess, real, tangible, and eternal in what they're trying to address, instead of just a vague sort of past life, like pagan sort of thing, if I'm making any sense. I just woke up, so I'm kind of rambling.
No, no, but
But
I'm understanding you completely. But my counter argument for that is that sure, the kind of the base for Vlad Tepes is kind of approach to melody and composition and all that. Okay, sure, it's very cliche, but it's got nothing to do with anyone else, right? Sure, a million bands have taken that kind of riffing style, have tried it, but Vlad Tepes has done it at a level that no one else can even come close to. They've taken the kind of used and abused Norwegian sound and did something that no one else did, and Francisized it completely.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not arguing that they did it one of the best. It's just that I'm always going to believe that that sort of sound is a bit capped due to the nature of the
Mm,
more, I guess, nostalgic, romanticized past sort of vibe, influence, aesthetic, whatever. Well, I think Belketra is, it doesn't really, it's not beholden to anything. It's beholden to death, if anything. It just
yeah.
wants everything to die. That's what the music sounds like. And to me, that is a lot more potent than, I guess, trying to appeal to some past European thing. Because you can see from Belketra, you can understand the music on a more primordial, like just instinctual basis. Like you
Mm.
hear these melodies and you can like not even know how music works, and you can just feel that it's sort of like spiteful and threatening. And I feel like Belketra is like one of the exceptions to a black metal band that actually sounds spiteful. Because like you'll get this fucking Norse core that's just like immortal riffs in played in like Phrygian, like do 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 with like a 280 BPM blast beat over it. And it's kind of cool in like the fun party, yeah, go off way. But Belketra has like an actual, I guess, anger or threat to it, which I find interesting. And it kind of appeals to that primordial drive for, I don't know, killing, death, whatever. And that, alongside, I guess, the occasional agonized parts we see, which are more along the Burzum line, that sort of, I don't know, it gives it a bit of nuance and sort of ties up the emotional bits of it into a nice size package. Like I said, I compared some of it to the more distorted parts of Burzum, but it's sort of inverted. While Burzum is mostly those despairing, longing riffs,
Mm.
with occasionally those angry, agonized riffs. Belketra is mostly the agonized riffs with the occasional longing riffs, like we'll see in a Night of Sadness, if we can play that right now.
Yeah, you know what? Let's go straight into it.
So yeah, that is probably that's the only sort of consonant riff I can think of on the Belkètre side of this. There's probably another one, it's just not coming to my mind. But yeah, we're starting off with this very, I guess, ambient, clean guitar lick in the back, with this lead guitar just going stepwise per repetition up.
Mm,
It kind of, I don't know, I'm just gonna give my subjective impressions, but it kind of seems like, in a way, it's kind of like drowning, because how I see it is like the grounding of the, I guess, like the harmony, how it stays the same, but the lead is reaching up. It's like some guy has like a weight tied to his foot, and he's trying to reach towards the surface to get air, and he just can't. I don't know. Is that too flavorful of an analogy?
I mean, I think it sums up, this kind of, this side of the split as well as, this song, which occurs kind of halfway through. And apart from that intro, it is a microcosm of the rest of,
Hmm.
what they're trying to do. The way that this kind of consonant, dreamlike yet really despaired riff kind of breaks out into complete and absolute madness before,
Hmm.
surfacing back at the end. It's just so
Yeah.
well done. In metal, we tend to be very kind of cynical towards, kind of slow, soft start, heavy ending, which was, really became very prominent within heavy metal and power metal and, kind of extreme metal wanted to kind of, turn
I
away
mean, the
from.
most popular Metallica song, not the
Exactly.
most popular, but like it's like the second most popular. What is one in like the most popular rank? I don't think it matters, but you get what I'm trying to say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like if you want to make a quote unquote heavy song, the most, I guess, trite way to do it is like you have the soft the soft intro and verse, and then the heavy chorus.
Yeah. And this, Belkètre do it so well because the kind of soft part is really fucking heavy in terms of, how despaired and how, insane it actually sounds,
Yeah,
right?
there's still weight to it emotionally, while something like, I guess, One by Metallica is just like do 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 do. It's just a very simplistic sort of, I guess, like pedal point between those like two notes, while the note of the root note just goes down.
Mm,
And it's just like sad melody writing 101. While this has the intro riff, which has a bit more harmonic complexity. And the second riff after that is like a good, I guess, transitionary piece, because it still has that clean guitar, but instead of being just this is sad, it's kind of mysterious, because I think they're playing some augmented chords, and there's a bit of a key change, and they're playing different sorts of intervals that are outside of minor. I'm pretty sure this is in the key of G sharp,
mm,
and they play um what's that note? A D in there, which would be, they go to like a D chord in there somewhere, which is, tritone to G sharp. So it's not completely in just G sharp minor, like I guess your typical sad intro would be. It makes it sort of despairing with these alternative note choices, along with the augmented arpeggios outlined by the clean guitar, and that mysterious sort of seething vibe transitions into, I guess, the meat of the piece, which honestly, still to this day, even though I've listened to this song probably like 15 times, I don't know what's going on during the blast part. I can tell with all the other songs, but this part is just it's a bit too much. But I
yeah,
don't think it's like a bad thing. I think it's like purposeful. Sometimes you gotta go into that chaos. Like, it's like a Slayer solo. You don't know what exactly is going on, but you just feel it.
yeah. And I think that's what makes, a lot of these French bands, even going to like the early 2000s so potent is that they knew when you needed that chaos, right? It's
Hmm.
it's not like a lot of these kind of war metal bands where it's like, okay, we get it, it's heavy, it's chaotic, blah blah, but then it just becomes like white noise. Belkètre are really good at making those parts sound really, really interesting.
Hmm.
Just really via, I think it's more so because they're very good at conveying emotional weight with all their, with their limited, canvas of tools, right?
Yeah, it's just the atmosphere. And I also just want to say, I feel like in the Hesh sphere, production gets very overlooked because it's like, oh, we're not shoegaze. This is not Sunbather. We don't want clean, pretty production. And it's just like, okay, sure, but production can actually add a lot of, I guess, aesthetic merit to whatever music that it's focusing on. And I feel like even though, these two bands, of course, it's like shitty demos, I feel like Belkètre, their production's particular because it's very trebly to the point of like hurting your ears. And so when it has this clean guitar, which is a lot more bass to it, it cuts through the mix quite nicely. And it makes the somber moments more somber because you're so used to this infernal like ear bleed, like that makes your ears bleed, fucking sort of treble coming from the distortion guitar. So that when you get this reverberated lower, more mellow, clean guitar, it feels like it actually hits you instead of just meshes in with the whole entire, soundscape already.
Yeah, people kind of, associate this, production style with Norwegian black metal, but this had nothing to do with it. Like this was, reading from quite a few sources, this was purposefully done to sound fucking terrible because, we'll get to them later, but on the Vlad Tepes side, right? So their second demo, War Funeral March, was done with actually some really good production, credits for the budget they had and everything. And they reverted back to that kind of more disgusting production because that's really what they wanted to do. It had to be absolutely rotten, and not rotten in the sense of like Transylvanian Hunger or Diabolical Full Moon Mysticism, which was still mixed in professional studios. These guys, I don't know, it's one mix of not knowing what they wanted, and two, this purposeful willingness, to alienate as many people as possible. Because, people forget that as much as the LLN is revered now, they had a lot of detractors back in the 90s.
A lot of the stuff still now is very controversial. Like I said, the ambient stuff. Like no, I don't think I've know a single torture fan like serious, like seriously, or like
Really?
a single serious Sus Forte fan.
And I think you're gonna have to find a bunch of guys in some forest, in a cabin in the middle of nowhere in France, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, it's insane, insane. But it's funny. One thing I think what makes this split really endearing as well is just how much bassier Vlad Tepes sounds in comparison to Belkètre.
Hmm.
That's one thing that I immediately noticed. It goes from, it it makes you think that, damn, did Vlad Tepes have like a lot of bass? And also, I cannot for the life of me figure this out, but were these guys banging sticks on a table at points, or were there actual drums?
I feel like Vlad Vladimir's March.
Mm.
The beginning is literally just it just is that. In fact, we should listen to it right now,
Yeah,
shouldn't we?
let's go straight into it. So obviously, we kind of go immediately from the kind of, hitting sticks straight into the kind of main melody, right? Which in many ways, it's built of a lot of this kind of, similar building blocks that we've heard a million times, but it has this kind of direct folk punk punkishness to it, which just really works really well. Simple riffing, I think harmonic minor scale here. So with this kind of little twist, right, that occurs within that scale, kind of like the wide steps, and then what, as soon as that like kind of riff plays out, they switch to a variation of it, which just keeps things going until they go back to the to the main riff before jumping straight into Massacre Song from the Devastated Lands. And all in all, it's super simple. But it's just that little spark of creativity that makes it so different from anything else.
Yeah, I just want to say that all the brutal death metal bands need to pay respect for that bass drop that happens. These guys were the first. Actually, no, this released. Was this before or after Pierce from Within?
Oof. Now, Vladimir's March was on a demo in, I think, in '94, so it
Did that
would.
have the bass drop in there?
I can't remember. I'm not sure if that one's available. A lot of these demos are very hard to track. It's not the same version though. All of these were re-recorded, which is,
Mm.
by the way, another interesting thing about Belkètre, right? Is that all these songs on their side of the split were part of a self-titled demo that was never released. Like everyone knows it exists, but it was never released. And these were just the re-recorded versions of them.
Yeah, so I don't know, I guess kind of like a stupid joke to make a whole thing about, but if this was before Suffocation, then all the brutal death metal bands need to pay tribute to Vlad Tepes. But anyway, about the melody, I'm gonna be a bit pedantic here, sorry. It's actually no harmonic minor, it's just
Oh
natural
damn.
minor.
Oh damn.
But I'm gonna explain how that's relevant. I feel like if it was um natural minor, it'd sound a bit more, I guess, neoclassical, while this is more rock and roll, I think. It
Mm,
feels a bit more traditional folk or rock and roll in how it's played with the 6/8 triplet feel, and I guess the Bathory inspired folky riffing, and it goes like do 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 do, just those sorts of riffs that I don't know, you'd see a bunch of bearded men pumping their fists in the bar to.
mm. But yeah, it's very simple, but you can tell like they spent a lot of time on this. I know this was reworked from a previous demo and everything. And even despite the kind of dumb drumming, the completely weird bass drop, which I'm genuinely convinced some guy in the background dropped something while they were recording, and like, yeah, keep that in. We don't have enough time for another take. It all somehow culminates perfectly. It's like this kind of thousand monkeys on a thousand typewriters, and you get this, which just is a perfect introduction for this.
Yeah, I remember the Johnny Come Marching Home thing I mentioned. It's actually in reference to this song, and I think I saw that in like a YouTube comment. So if you're watching this, sorry that I plagiarized you, but it's a pretty apt comparison.
Yeah. So let's move on. Um, I feel like talking about what I consider to be the best song on this entire split, probably my favorite LLN song ever, and one of those rare 12 and a half minute classics that many black metal bands try, but few manage to ever do. Drink the poetry of
Hmm.
the Celtic Disciple. What a
Oh
song.
yeah.
I mean, absolutely perfect. We've got so much variety. Weirdly enough, for this style, dude, the solos contribute so much to this. They aren't played well, proficiently. Obviously, they're out of time, but just the note choice and the kind of phrasing, despite being very simplistic and minimalistic, really, it just fits these kind of weird riffs. And this is where you see Vlad Tepes's melodic style really explored fully, and this kind of psychedelic influence To that is so that no one has quite done, this kind of psychedelic take on old Bathory and Burzum melodies. And the way it
Hmm.
all culminates and it goes through, there's a lot of variety in terms of emotions. There's some highs, there's some lows. There's absolutely everything. And it's really one of those songs that despite being 12 and a half minutes, it feels like it's barely 5 minutes because of just how good they are at going through the motions in such a long time and always keeping things interesting without, ever betraying their kind of, what they want to do on the other songs. Or that opening riff, well, not opening, the riff that starts this passage reminds me of something that Cream would do. That kind of that very chromatic and circular kind of riff, right? Well, right. And if you pay attention, panned left, there's an actual second guitar that is doing this kind of primitive violining thing. Just kind of like little beeps and boops coming out. It just fits so well. And then obviously how it kind of it takes its time, but then it breaks into that fantastic solo that lasts for a minute and goes through in my opinion are the essence, those riffs right beneath the solo are the essence of what
Hmm.
French black metal is. The kind of almost twangly folky sound, but not Norwegian, not as kind of Scandinavian folk, but more of a traditional French slash Breton slash Celtic folk, right?
Yeah.
um I like, one, if we're talking about the guitar solo, it's crazy to hear something like that because, at first glance, you'd think it's almost not virtuoso, but it's definitely inspired by a lot of the kind of hard rock and the heavy metal shredders of the past, right? But more so focused on this kind on maintaining atmosphere. It's this very kind of basic, 16th note straight, flurry of notes. Within every four repetitions, it just kind of holds a note and then repeats, and it kind of maintains that through the different riff changes, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And
What I'd like to say is that a little passage that starts off with like this sort of slow doomy riff that's just like do 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 do.
yeah,
You said you noticed the bow part, or I guess a part that emulates it.
yeah,
The thing is, I kind of hear what you're talking about because it's kind of like, isn't it like a third up? It's like do 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 do.
yeah, something, yeah, exactly. But but I think because it's only a third up, and because of the production style, the a lot of the notes tend to kind of like bleed into each other.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. With these types of productions, because it kind of obscures everything, it creates this sort of like subliminal fake soundscape sometimes. And I feel like black metal uses that a lot to its advantage because it's already supposed to be an obscure genre. So any like minimal changes like that, like nobody's gonna immediately hear them, but it adds this sort of, I guess, subconscious recognition of like, okay, something's going on. And I find that interesting than if it were to have like clear production and you can hear exactly what's going on. And it's like, oh, it's this. Because I don't know, in my experience mixing stuff, I always am like, okay, is this part loud enough? Will people be able to recognize this? But then I make it too loud. And I realize some things are better as a sort of like, I don't know, a little garnish instead of just being like overblown because it adds flavor to it without it being overblown. And not everything needs to be totally noticed. That's just like a side tangent.
No, I completely agree with you. I think that's one of the most important things that, metal production has kind of lost throughout the years is that, everything should be in service of the song, right? We don't, you can have a really cool like bass part or, guitar part, whatever. We don't necessarily need to hear it perfectly if it's in service of the song. It can be a little kind of, Easter egg that just really enriches. And a lot of the times, a lot of these kind of like, I wouldn't even call them harmonies, right? I'd call them like layers. They completely change the feel of the song despite being barely,
Yeah.
audible, right?
You
And this
kind of
is
see
a
the continuation to like bands like Xasthur or like Leviathan. I know people around this circle probably don't really care for them that much. I like Blind Wound and I like some of the Xasthur demos. I'll defend those. But you can hear how they take that influence in their subtle layering, especially what's the Xasthur guy's name again?
Maleficent, I think, was it?
I don't know. I'm just gonna call him Xasthur guy. But Xasthur guy, he does this thing where it's like just a loop of two or three riffs, but he just keeps on adding these subtle layers and you just sort of get lost in it,
Hmm.
trying to like decipher what these little layers are. And I think that's how they make this sort of hypnotic sound. And it comes across more like, I guess, some sort of dark ambient than full blown, I guess, black metal in how it uses these subtle layers in order to create sonic intrigue instead
Yeah,
of focusing more on composition. But Vlad Tepes has the best of both worlds, it seems, at least in this part.
definitely. And that kind of fast riff where it breaks out into the solo.
Hmm.
You know that part for me is French black metal perfection. That kind of riffing style would be bled to death by Peste Noire and even a lot of the more kind of orthodox French orthodox black metal bands like Alsoff and all that would really try to uh tap into that. And I think that's really what, in many ways, it's kind of bled into what, all those bands that people call, the Franco-Finnish style. Even probably possibly, some of the Ukrainian bands and everything. I definitely think that, everyone was very tuned in, at least for a short while, into what Vlad Tepes was doing. And a lot of the genius of this, kind of gets forgotten because so many bands have tried to emulate this.
Hmm.
But yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to the next one. I think we want to talk a bit about, the first track on the Belkètre side, right? The
Oh,
longest song, Guilty, right?
oh yeah, wait. Don't you have one more from Vlad Tepes?
Yeah, I mean, we can jump
Okay.
around or go through.
Let's do Guilty because I was actually going to talk about Guilty.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about like the production and how that contributes to. Actually, I don't even know if this is a production thing, but I'd say it's less along the compositional strictly lines. Like you can't just fucking recreate this in Muse score and have it come out the way you want. But yeah, Guilty. So yeah, what I was gonna say about this is I don't know if you call this production, but that little quote unquote lead, if you'd call it, I don't know what you would call it, but it's that high droning note in the background.
Mm,
I guess I don't know if like in a way it's a lead. If you can call that one like Ramon solo Blitzkrieg Bop that's literally just two notes, if that's a solo, and I'm gonna call this a lead, all right?
yeah.
But that little lead in the back, this is literally just playing two notes, and one of them's just the octave. It's just following the root notes of the chords, but it's detuned slightly down. And I couldn't tell it was an octave until I like thought about it for a little bit because it just sounds like this Z factor unexpected like note from hell. And then you realize, oh, this is just the octave, but tuned slightly down, so it sounds just absolutely gross.
I
And it's
mean,
just like it plays that while doing this very droning drum line. Boom, boom, boom. And then, it goes back. It just plays that same thing for like, I don't know, a minute and a half. Just for a very long time, it plods on it. But just the changes around it sort of really immerse you in that vibe while keeping it interesting as well as just like agonizing. Because you have like the start of the chord progression at the start when there's no drums. And actually, I lied. It doesn't follow the root notes because the root notes are do 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 do. That do isn't reflected by
mm,
the lead, but it gives it this actually pseudo diminished flavor because there's they're playing basically all in minor thirds right here. Besides that last part where it goes up a half step, the do to do. And I don't know, it's just I wouldn't say it's fully diminished. I'm just talking out my ass here right now because I didn't write notes. But you can kind of see what I'm getting at, right?
yeah. I mean,
That do
you
do 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 diminished scale type
what I'm
vibe.
what I'm gonna say is that this is quite funny. So, we've seen a lot of these kind of like super technical avant-garde bands, try their hand at
Hmm.
microtonal metal with, very well-tuned guitars, fretless guitars, and anything. This is real fucking microtonal metal because I know for
Hmm.
a fact these guys are not tuned. And I see what you mean, but with the octave thing not sounding like an octave, I just think that they know what an octave shape looks like, right? They know you've got your notes on the guitar, you jump up, two strings, two frets, you're on an octave, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's the fact that it's not even that badly detuned, but they probably didn't care enough for a tune, and they tried like they probably had like a shitty kind of reference, and they're like, whatever, it's good enough, right? And that just makes everything sound weirder because earlier you were saying that you weren't sure if they were diminished or augmented fifths what they were using on the kind of the sadness part, but I think they're playing power chords, and it's just that everything is so fucking detuned that it just ends up sounding insane because they have the atmosphere, they have the pace, they have the great that kind of sense of dynamism to keep things always kind of really intense without getting boring. And just with everything combined, just the fact that the guitars are pretty detuned, just they're inventing a new style of melody completely.
That actually is that's a pretty interesting theory. I'd have to like listen a bit more because I was trying to go from my more, I guess, autistic theoretical lens, but then I realized these guys don't know what they're doing. I just kind of have to, I don't know, I guess have to call a spade a spade. And they didn't know what they're doing. They just tried to make evil ass sounds and they succeeded. And I just also like how the lead, as I called it, just fades into the back as it goes into the blast part.
Yeah.
Everything just becomes this, I guess, primordial soup of evil. And I don't know if that was intentional or if it was like a production quirk, but that is probably my favorite part of the song or favorite aspect of the song is how as it just transitions into that so seamlessly. And I don't know, if the lead were to just stay like that, it would still be cool, but the fact that it ha kind of has to fade into the background and just sort of submit to this, I don't know, very base level like chaotic. I don't know what you know what I'm trying to get at, right?
Yeah.
It kind of gives it more weight than I'd expect it to. It kind of reminds me also of that one riff on the Ibex Moon where it's just like the power chords going doo 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 doo, and then the lead comes in on the second half of the bar, and it's just like it's playing an octave or it's playing a third, one of those two, but it sounds so evil even though it's such a basic sort of um harmony.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's really crazy how they managed, to get everything, like it sounds like a bunch of, power chords, but when you take in the absolutely dreadful production, the how nothing seems in tune or in place, the weird kind of kick drum sound, and just this
Mhm.
almost, this spontaneity, despite these songs being re-recorded, it makes this really weird cocktail that just sounds completely disturbing.
Yeah, I feel like black metal always tried to be sort of on the edge, kind of disturbing, but a lot of it sort of feels like a caricature. I mean, in a way, LLN is sort of a caricature, but it's an uncanny valley caricature where there's like enough reality to it,
Mm,
but also it's sort of goofy and it kind of adds to the ambiguity and therefore makes it even more strange because it's like you can feel it that it's real, but it's also sort of goofy, and you don't know what exactly to think about it, and that's cool to me.
yeah, definitely.
I mean, you can even hear it in like some of those ambient uh intros and stuff. Like Hate. You remember Hate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it has actually can we just play Hate
yeah. Let's go.
a
What
bit?
part?
I want to play an ambient part. Honestly, I think this is reflective. This track is reflective of more the typical, I guess, Vorb style in how it's just these droning, sort of seething ambient guitars with strange noises, I'll say, in the back. And it's not even particularly progressive because if you notice, if you look, pay attention to the guitars, they're just playing the same sorts of motifs over and over. They're just moving them in I guess chromatic fashion. Like it starts out going do do do. So yeah, so it's to the one, to the minor six, to the diminished, and it goes just that does that, but then a third up, and eventually you'll get to the do do do, where the riff, or I guess the phrase, not the phrase, motif. I don't even know what word to use for these just like mini riffs. But instead of doing that, it's like the first to the perfect fifth to the minor second. But it's the same general principle of like, you know, up or you have your root note, it goes up to a, I guess, more constant interval and then to a dissonant interval. It reflects that same sort of, I guess, change but instead of the diminished, it's to the minor second. So just both your most evil notes in the scale, of course, but they just take those mini riffs and just move them around chromatically. Then comes in the same, I guess, repetition after a little cut, and there's these just like Growls,
Animal sounds, man. Like,
animal sounds. I feel like I can't tell what they did. I feel like they either like took like some stock animal sound library and just slowed it down, or they did like he just did like a black metal screech and slowed that down.
yeah, I think the second option is a lot more likely, than them having, a stock of animal sounds, ready to use.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel like were those expensive back in the day? Because I could
No, I
just
think,
literally pirate them
yeah. I mean, they
right
didn't have
now.
access to internet, dude. It was all like fucking, 8-track recorders. I think even for
Oh
most of the
yeah.
stuff it was like 4-track even.
Okay, yeah, that was just a dumb idea. I'm not thinking right now.
Yeah.
But you get the vibe, right? It's this is the main this is where Vorb mainly stays in terms of most of his music is these ambient guitar mood pieces that don't really stray. There's not really a narrative. It's just completely soaking in this ominous atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it even sounds like you said before, some of it's a bit ridiculous. It enters this uncanny valley where it's just like, what the hell is even going on? This is quite funny, but it also feels a bit threatening as well, as I explained before. And that is mainly exemplified by those slowed down shrieks that have all that like vocal fry and distortion. It just sounds out of this world.
I know there's something so French about this at the same time, We see this in so many different French forms of media, straying that kind of thin line between being ridiculous and being the most fucked up, nightmare-inducing fuel that you'll ever come across.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of metal is best when it sort of strays that line because I'd say a lot of I remember I heard this said about like Pro Fanatica, how their
Yeah.
like riffs are like nursery rhyme melodies, but in like Locrian or something.
Mm.
And it's just like I understand what you mean. It has this sort of it's sort of gleeful. It's sort of happy and gleeful, but it's also decadent. And it's just like I don't know, it's cool.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah. I think we could kind of summarize the whole kind of, Belkètre side of the split as like this, absolutely insane thing that you could never emulate this, despite how simple it is, because of all the kind of, previously discussed elements and Vord's kind of insane, one note mind when it comes to composition. And it just there's
Yeah.
nothing that quite sounds like it, obviously, Profanatica, Infesta come to kind of like similar conclusions, been completely different ways, right?
hmm I don't know if he's just he has just a great vision or he's just like an outsider musician or just both.
I think it's a bit of both. Like he's hit and miss. His other project, right? Well, he did that. He did with the Vlad teams, right? Black Murder within the LLN has a lot of this as well, where it sounds like sometimes it sounds like the most demented and DSBM you've ever heard. 10 years before that thing, before that word ever existed, and then at times you're like, why am I listening to this? It's while mutilation, and Vlad Tepes are like the face of the LLN movement. I think no one embodies that vision more to this, even to this day than Vord, right?
Yeah, he definitely was the heart of it. Like if you were to, I guess, eschew any of the more conventional sensibilities, he would be, I guess, the mastermind behind all the art of it, or most of the art of it. Not to like discredit anybody else,
Mm,
but I just feel like what he does exemplifies, I guess, exemplifies what the I don't know, my vocabulary's fucking up right now, but he's like the core of I think like the art
yeah.
of like whatever LLN was going for. Not to discredit anybody, but just that he had a better grasp on, I guess, what it was at its base level, instinctually.
It's crazy. He still continues to this day, like I said, he's still, even this morning he's posting stuff. He is LLN. If it was a human, it's him, right? Everything.
Yeah.
The despite the insanely voluminous output over the years, um, the name recognition, no one knows who he is. He lives in, I've never seen a picture of the guy without like, 10 tons of, makeup, right? Or anything. It's
Even like does like active gatekeeping by taking down all the uploads of his stuff.
Yeah, exactly, dude. He forces you to go through the Calais Darkness Bandcamp, right? Everything, he wants to control it, I mean, he's the only one of those guys from that time period who is stuck to himself, right? Because fucking Vice of all people did a documentary on the LNN, and right, and you look at like, well, LN and early black metal, and you look at these guys like they're kind of like they almost regret not chasing the spotlight, and then they don't even mention the most important person of all, which is Vord, right?
Yeah, he's just operating from the shadows. Wait, Vice did a documentary on them? I thought they did a documentary on Xasther and Streborg.
Yeah, they did. They did that. That was the one man band documentary, which is like that. Where I think where they realized, wait, people are really into this black metal stuff. A lot of their kind of hit. It was the perfect kind of storm. Where the hips just kind of got into it and had everything. And a lot of these guys had, very edgy personas. And then, when they did the LLN one, it was just like, damn, these guys are really fucking washed up at this point, right?
I haven't seen it. I kind of am interested now because I
Yeah,
know they're just like this is probably the most like well-known black metal group that is still like very rare and unknown. Like there's such like cult classic underground legends,
yeah.
but I don't even think like half the members like real names are known.
No, I don't think so. Him and the other guy, Kekon, Atrig, and a lot of their collaborators, because people forget, Belkètre, even as an entity with both of them, they had multiple bands, right? And they don't consider them to be part of like a continuity, right? They're just very distinct ideas. And a lot of times you've got these guys like, they play drums on one thing, they disappear, or maybe they come back, play another instrument on another release, but we'll never fucking know. That's the issue, right?
Hmm.
We'll never see, we'll never know who a lot of these people are. And I think that's what makes, Belkel's art so potent to this day. It's just that he stuck to his vision until the very fucking end.
Yep.
All right, let's do another Vlad Tepes, right? Let's
Yeah.
finish. I was thinking like 2 minutes something in Under the Carpathian Yoke, which is a really good kind of synopsis of what this band is about as well, right? So, obviously still very indebted to Bathory, right? But this time, they've got a lot more of a kind of, dexterous twist to it, right? There's a lot more movement between the notes and everything. Um, and despite it being that kind of like, you know, that paced, right? Fast paced, right? Not specifically fast, but fast paced in how it sounds, right? It still maintains that kind of folky touch that they have through the other songs, right?
I'm gonna say something really out of pocket, but it's just sort of like an evil 12 bar blues at some point because it has like the do 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 do. Do you hear it? Or am I going crazy?
I know what you mean, right? But I think you're kind of exaggerating at this point.
I am, but it's just I hear the do 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 do, and I just kind of think this is 12 bar blues.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
it kind of has a line because it comes from folk music, which has, that swung 6/8 sort of vibe, and then it transitions to like American folk, and then you get blues. It's not exactly that, but it's kind of there. It's kind of a tangent, I'm sorry.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
just thought it would be funny to say.
But I see what you mean. But yeah, I'm just saying, in that where a lot of like kind of folky black metal riffs are, tend to be very simple, go through a bunch of chords. Vlad Tepes are like, hey, we're gonna have that kind of folky dance part, but we're gonna make it a very hyperactive riff at the same time.
Yeah, I noticed that because it kind of does an A B section with this part between two riffs that sound very similar. You have the one that goes like which is I guess the most common on my Zoom when I started humming that it just said playing music. It just like a little notification came up, but yeah, it has that and I guess that's the more grounded part. And then after that it plays a variation on that, but it's kind of messy. I don't know if I call it messy. Like I said, it's one of those things where you can't tell if it's intentional or sloppy, but it kind of plays around that fifth, or it is like augmented to diminished. It just kind of like do 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 plays around that, and you don't exactly know what's going on and where the beat is. It has this sort of like drunken feeling, and that's kind of sort of common with like a lot of I guess folk metal because it's like the most pubby version of metal. But here it sounds a bit more dire because of I guess their note choice, their atmosphere. And this is in I guess a more dark mode because I'm pretty sure it's Phrygian because the do 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 that minor second.
Mm,
But they are just playing around scalar those scalar positions and just adding a bit of their flair to it to give it a bit of an edge and a bit of a drunkenness that I don't know. It's kind of like stumbling around in a forest.
yeah, yeah, I mean, that kind of drunken French playing, you know, French black metal style it's one of the hardest things to do and something that, very few bands can do. And as we said, Peste Noire has made a career out of it, right? You look at Famine, right? Very good guitarist. He's capable of playing normally, right? But he's got that kind, he indulges in that kind of drunken playing. I mean, it's much more obvious with him that, he's messing around. But just that kind of complete disregard for time, it's what makes these riffs so perfect, right? It's like when we were talking about the Morbid Angel Blessed Are the Sick, right? When we did that video, we know we're talking about how they didn't really care about a metronome. Everything was just kind of like approximately the same time zone, right? And this again is another example of that, but in a completely different context that just enriches this riff so much.
hmm With Morbid Angel, it's more like they're playing so many notes per second during like a scale run that you can't tell like it sort of accidentally becomes like a septuplet, but they
Yeah.
don't even know what that means probably. But here it's like I'm gonna like make an analogy to like modern fucking bedroom black metal DAW stuff. But like when you put in like one riff after another, you just like make it your first take and then call it a day.
Mm.
You just record it in one take, disregard the mistakes, and you're like, yeah, that's good enough. This is what I feel like they're doing. And it kind of phases in and out the left and the right guitars. Because like the left guitar will be playing something slightly different from the right, and it'll give this, as you say, psychedelic vibe to it, the drunkenness, as we say.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the difference between them and bedroom black metal bands, right, is that these guys have been playing these songs together for, at least a year. Probably meeting
Mhm.
5, 6 times a week. And like, hey, damn, I love the way this feels, that specific vibe, and they just go around, playing that one riff again and again, and then, making a song around that, right?
Yeah.
So, I definitely do feel that the entirety of Vlad Tepes is like the kind of relationship between the drag themes and, how they manage to make it all kind of, work within probably what must be the shittiest practice space imaginable. Two small, tiny amps, detuned guitars, and two guys in this fucking cold, damp storage room just playing these riffs.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think we've said everything we had to say. Any final statements on Vlad Tepes?
Um, Trying to think if I had anything interesting to say, honestly. I think I got most of it out. I guess to sum it up, it's like it has the, of course, Burzum slash Bathory slash folk black sort of aesthetic to it, but they have their own flourishes with these I guess these garnishes on the side with the production helping to make it a bit more subliminal and these more ethereal and drunken chord progressions along with I guess some more intentional sloppy playing to make it I guess a bit more original, a bit more real than a lot of the more caricatured sort of black metal of this style
Mm.
and sort of elevates it to a higher standard.
Yeah, I mean, if Vord and Belkètre is the essence of LLN, Vlad Tepes is what everyone takes out of it, right? And where people tend to stop. And it's very funny in that both have an equally important legacy in the development of black metal, but for completely opposite reasons, right? Vlad
Hmm.
Tepes, that style was taken by so many bands, even the bands on the Antique label are very closely indebted to the style. I'm talking bands like Vehemence, Passéisme, earlier KPN, Osculum in Fame, Crystal Nacht, so on and so forth, right? And obviously, it's now even spread across to, various other regions. But, more so than Mutilation, I believe, despite Mutilation being a lot more popular, this is the band that has defined French black metal and what people think French black metal is. Whereas Vord, Belkètre, is the style, is what French black metal truly was, and that no one quite picked up on.
Yeah, I've barely seen any like Belketra or like more underground, I guess, LLN worship. I found like a couple bands, and my friend has shown me a couple bands, but they're so obscure. They like get like sub 500 views on YouTube. Like
Yeah,
that's how obscure these guys are.
it's crazy. I mean, incredible legacy, and this is, for me, definitely one of, as this, because what's really sad is I forgot to mention this important fact. None of these guys ever released a full length. There are no full lengths in, the four people involved on this
Hmm.
release, right? Both sides have never released an album.
What type of release? I mean, I know it's a split, but like, can't albums be splits?
I think what I mean by album, I mean is like an LP sized collection of songs by one band, right? With a
Oh,
kind of like coherent thing. I think the big shot in the foot. I think this is why Mutilation, um, became the most popular because Mutilation actually had albums, and I can't think of anyone in the LLN movement that actually had albums, right?
yeah.
I, I'm just gonna look. None. No one did, dude. There's literally Mutilation. That's it. No one else has albums, right? Civis does not have albums. Suvoutre does not have albums. Verampere Commando does not have albums. Yeah, there's only Mutilation. That's it.
I
And
mean,
that's the
isn't there like album sort of descriptor? Like, did they record that in a studio, or is it just kind of arbitrarily considered like an album?
I think
That's
it's
how it
more so,
works.
yeah, more so the vision and the way the songs are put, like at this time. Wait, this is post vinyl, so this is CD era. So yeah, I think anything more than 30 minutes was just of music was just called an album, right?
I
And that was
mean,
like
this is
properly
this is like
distributed.
an hour.
Yeah, but it's in reality it's a compilation of multiple demos, right?
What's interesting though is that like even though it's like demos, I still see like a trackless vision. I mean, you can see a trackless vision for both sides because Vladimir's March, that's an intro.
Yeah.
Under the Carpathian Yoke, I don't know how that functions as an outro. Is there like an outro bit that kind of makes it finalized?
Yeah, I think it is right. It probably is an album in the kind of pure sense because it definitely does sound very coherent to me. It definitely sounds like, as a whole, right? Um,
Hmm.
you know, a tale of two sides, right? So I can definitely see that. But yeah, but I would have loved from each of these bands for a proper full length from both of them.
Yeah, I still understand what you mean, but I still say that this technically is an album because there's still a vision because,
Yeah.
Belkètre's side also, Guilty, 6 minute long intro track, puts you through the rings of what they are, interspersed with these ambient interludes, and the last two songs, Those of Our Blood and If We Have, the most longing song titles, giving it this sort of weak sort of outro closer with those two, I guess, statements.
Yeah. It is what it is. Be careful of bootlegs. Don't go around buying random things on eBay.
Hmm.
Uh, buy from Calais, what's it? Calais Vision and Calais Darkness, and I think yeah, Drakkar Productions owns all the rights to Vlad Tepes, and that's it. I've got nothing. I think we've said it all. This is a great album, split slash album, whatever you want to call it, and hopefully in the future we'll go down the kind of LLN rabbit hole even further, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's only like one other There's only probably only one other album we can do for like a case for greatest album for probably like a more, I guess, in-depth couple videos, more on I guess like the culture or like the history or
Mm.
just the general musical development. That would probably be cool. But would we ever do like a mutilation album, you think?
Oh, definitely, dude. We have to do that, but I just felt with this release just because oh no you proposed it but I was like yeah damn you're right this release is French black metal if I had to choose one release in the history of French black metal or even French metal what kind of expressed the best ideas from that I would choose this one
Hmm.
and
Um,
and
yeah,
I love
probably.
Separation I'm a big Cube fan right
But yeah, separation is it's a bit too specialized. This
yeah
covers all the bases, I think. Not
yeah
all the bases, but all the black metal bases at least. Like this is like the start of the evolutionary line for I guess modern day French black.
yeah that still continues to this day with a lot of pretty good releases that we'll cover in later installments or something. But yeah, any final words?
Um, the Belkètre side's better.
No, do not listen to this. All right, thanks again, Malus. Enjoy, have a good day.
You too.